America. This is a sequel, so it's not Coming to America, the 1988 film. It is Coming the Number 2 America. So that's easy to remember.
Real Abbott and Costello bit trying to pronounce this title on the airwaves, but yeah, it's Coming the Number 2 America.
Yeah, you can't see us quoting, two fingers to show that it's Coming to America. So this was directed by Craig Brewer. He did Dolomite Is My Name, also with Eddie Murphy, and that was a Netflix film. This was originally a Paramount film that got sold to Amazon Studios during the pandemic and is now being released digitally, which definitely feels kind of like an interesting move. They paid a lot of money for this. And already the budget was like $60 million. They spent money on this movie. And so for it to not get a theatrical release is kind of interesting. And just going straight to Amazon, I kind of wonder what the arithmetic is there.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not at Paramount. I can't say for certain, but I have to imagine it's like, well, Paramount is selling a lot of their movies already. They're trying to like kind of get themselves out of a hole, and they've been doing that with
this is
like
great
Trial
for Paramount,
Chicago.
For sure. Like they got the best end of this deal.
Oh, for sure. But I mean, they sold Trial Chicago 7, like that's, Best Picture runner. So they sold that to Netflix. They sold a few other films. They sold the Cloverfield thing to them as well. And I believe they sold something else to Amazon recently. But from their standpoint, I think they were thinking.
They sold Cinemaholics Plus.
Sure.
Sorry to announce that.
Yeah. But I think from their perspective, they're looking at like, well, look at Borat 2 or Borat subsequent movie film, and like that did really well in the service. Like that was a film that like people weren't really expecting. That's a decades later sequel as well, and they put it on the service to great success. Not to quote the movie, but
cringe.
Yeah. I mean, it did really well on Amazon, and it got a wide audience. And I think from their standpoint, because this deal was announced, I think only a month or two afterwards in December. So I think they were just like, well, if they can do really well with Borat 2, they could probably do well with this, because we don't know if we can sell this well. Like even if theaters open up in normal capacity, like there's no guarantee that this is going to do adequate business, because it's a decades later sequel. We don't really know if this appeals to younger audiences. This is clearly more of a nostalgia thing, and like I said, with the budget that we have in this week, you can't say for certain this is going to do well. So I think that's their line of thinking, but I have no idea for certain.
Yeah, I mean, that all makes sense. There's a lot we obviously don't know, and we kind of have to guess and pontificate. But yeah, overall, I think that for Paramount, it's a super fantastic deal just because they're washing their hands of this. And later in the week, we'll be talking more about Paramount Plus and all of that business, the streaming service, when we talk about SpongeBob, Sponge on the Run. But for now, we're talking about this one, which is on Amazon. And the original Coming to America, we have to say, was a huge, huge success. I did see a few people being like, oh yeah, Coming to America, that cult classic. And I'm like, what planet are you from? That movie was one of the biggest films of the 80s. It made like, I think over $100 million.
200 million, I believe, worldwide. I think it was the third highest grossing film of 1988, if I'm not.
Yeah. There's some weird sort of like people who were born in the 90s like us, kind of assuming this film wasn't some sort of big hit. I mean, when I was growing up, Coming to America was on TV like constantly. Like my first experience watching this movie was in bits and pieces on like TBS or TNT or whatever it was. So yeah, this definitely makes sense as a sequel. A lot of people know these characters are like the basic outline of this movie, right?
Yeah, actually, I just looked it up. It's the second highest grossing film, 1988, after Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
That's pretty wild. So this sequel takes place 30 years after the events of Coming to America. Now, that movie was a hard R. It had F-bombs. It had some gratuitous nudity. They've kind of sanitized it this time around. It's more of a PG-13 movie. That's not to say that the first one is a lot edgier. It's just more of like, it has well-placed jokes that are more profane, I guess.
I mean, by today's standards, or like early, even like 2000 standards, it's not that edgy. But yeah, right. For like a 80s studio comedy, it has some thorns in its side for sure.
Sure. The screenplay comes from Kenya Barris, Barry W. Blaustein, and David Sheffield. And a lot of the original cast is returning here, mainly Eddie Murphy and Arsenio Hall. Great to see Arsenio Hall. And again, it's been a long, long time since we've seen him in a film. And we haven't even seen him on like TV or anything. We've just kind of gotten like voice cameos and things like that from him, voice roles. But also joining the cast, we have some new characters. We have Jermaine Fowler, who plays like the bastard son of Eddie Murphy's character. And they have a whole thing. We also have Tracy Morgan, who plays his uncle, Leslie Jones, who plays his mother. There's now a retconning subplot where it turns out that Prince Akeem fathered a child in Queens. And if you thought the Wonder Woman 1984 sort of stuff was a little bit like, had issues
Yeah.
with consent,
Yeah.
um, then
Um,
yeah, here
I'm
we go
kind of surprised
again.
people aren't making a bigger deal about that. I was kind of surprised. Like, I mean, they might be, and I'm just not seeing it. But I'm kind of like, this is quite a choice for 2021. But yeah.
Sure. I mean, I guess they probably think because it's more of a comedy that it, laughing at it, it's okay. I don't know. I guess with Wonder Woman, it was played a little bit more straight, which is probably more discomforting. But regardless, the whole point is consent is really important and we should not make light of that for sure. But this film just kind of uses that as a means to be like, oh, Prince Akeem didn't know he had a son. That's the whole plot purpose there. There's a lot of lampshading in this movie, by the way. But also, some of the best new characters come in the form of Wesley Snipes, who plays this general character who's threatening the existence of Zamunda. There is James Earl Jones, by the way, returns as the father. Sherry Headley is back, which is great. We also have Kiki Lane as one of Prince Akeem's daughters. And kind of this film kind of struggles with two different plots. There's a whole plot of how Prince Akeem has three daughters, but he has to have a male heir, he thinks, in order to have like a prince on the throne once his father passes away. And his daughter, Mika, played by Kiki Lane, is like, well, I can do it. I've been training for this my whole life. So there's that kind of side of the story of like the gender politics of monarchies in Africa and all of that. And then there's this other subplot of like Jermaine Fowler, who goes from Queens and he goes to Zamunda to be like, well, I can be a prince. And he kind of goes on like the, a Prince Aladdin adventure. Maybe we can bring up Aladdin with every film review this week. I don't know. But yeah, he has this whole thing. And I'm just gonna say this is definitely one of those movies that succeeds in spite of itself, but ultimately just is still very, very weak. I think this story is really basic. And I think that it's just kind of an exercise in nostalgia for the sake of it. And I really didn't warm to it much. I rewatched Coming to America earlier this week, and I definitely enjoyed it. It's never been a film that's been my favorite of the 80s comedies. I know people really, really love it. I think it's just kind of a breezy, enjoyable watch. And the McDowell's thing always gets me. I think with that, and also John Amos comes back in this, which is great. That stuff is gold. But then there's other things here that I think are just very dated. It just really feels like comedy that like people found funny in the 80s and 90s kind of making its way back again. And yeah, aside from that, there's just really not much standing out here. But what do you think, Will? Were you enjoying your revisit to America?
Well, I will say, I mean, I also rewatched the first Coming to America as well, and I agree it doesn't fully work in a modern set, only in the sense that like not so much the comedy itself, but because the pacing of it is a lot more slack than I remember. Like
Yeah,
you were
especially
saying,
the end. That the last like 30 minutes is really boring to me. Like it's just there's not much story there.
yeah, in a way that I kind of admire because it's like there's so much like rapid fire comedies right now that I kind of appreciate how much that movie is willing to just be like calm and in the moment, but at the same time, it does kind of feel like they're padding it out a lot, which is weird because it's almost 2 hours. But nevertheless, I still think that movie works. I think primarily what works is Eddie Murphy and his star power. Like he clearly, he was coming off of the 80s like as this comedy legend type persona, and he was fully relishing it and playing all these different characters. Same with Arsenio Hall. Like they clearly made the most of that movie, and it's easy to see how that was a huge hit. Now I think that's the type of movie that I think it's better to have like on like in the background, like if you're like a cabin trip or something, and like the boring moments you can kind of get up and like do whatever and then come back for like the barbershop scene and stuff like that. I think that's the ideal way to watch it. So I think putting this on Amazon inadvertently was probably the better option because
Yeah.
um I'll just say out front, I think this is a bad film. Like, I think it's almost terrible, just because, like you said, like it is so pandering. It's so much about the nostalgia of the brand that barely ever stands out on its own. But even the stuff that they add into it doesn't ever really fully work because it's trying to like kind of replicate the story, but also not. And it just doesn't ever really fully feel comfortable with itself, even down to like the visual aesthetics of it. A lot of people have been talking about how it looks worse than the first movie because it's shot in digital. And I think that's part of it. I also think it just has like this kind of like flat sitcom lighting to it as well. And there's just not a lot of like visual styles that come from shooting this primarily on green screens and stuff like that, which is very, very noticeable for the Queen scenes. But I do agree that like I think the stuff that works is when we actually get to see like Eddie Murphy and Arsenio Hall just having fun, kind of bouncing off each other. And then also we have like, Wesley Snipes clearly having a ball with his supporting character. Tracy Morgan's fun in this. Kiki Lane, I think, probably should have been given more due because she's clearly, out acting most of the people in this movie in terms of her performance. But I just found it to be a really just embarrassing and sad ordeal to sit through.
Yeah, yeah. I think that this film, critics in general have been really turning against it, and it's very mixed. Like I think right now on Rotten Tomatoes, it's like 52%, and that's kind of how I'm feeling. I don't think it's actively terrible. I just think it's very mediocre. I want to read a piece from one of our colleagues, Katya Woods, who wrote about the film for Cup of Soul. And she said the one positive about Coming to America is Eddie Murphy. He still gives us moments of laughter despite the above, which she's been kind of getting in the negatives at this point. His talent will shine no matter how dated the situation. The set design and costuming are also festive. Academy Award winner Ruth Carter did bring a little of Wakanda to Zamunda. It was also lovely to see how Zamunda, the country, operated. The last film took place primarily in Queens. The other highlight was seeing Morgan Freeman and James Earl Jones in a movie together. I guarantee that will be a Jeopardy question down the road. I think she's kind of getting to like how this film, it does feel like a party. A party of just like it's enjoying itself. These characters are having such a good time. It's almost pretty infectious. So I've spent a lot of my time just sort of enjoying this, the attitude of the people involved. It doesn't look like anybody who's in this doesn't want to be there. And so that does, for me at least, go a long way because I just felt like I was enjoying being back in this world again. Now, a lot of the stuff in here really just does not age well. There's still a lot of like just little things here and there, like the colorism of Vanessa Bell Calloway just doesn't quite and it doesn't get reckoned with in a way that I think is pretty fair. That's something the original film absolutely suffered from. In addition, I think that the gender politics of this are really, really weak. I think that everything going on here with the agency of Mika and how women in this film are treated, I think is very, it's a very mixed effort at best. But yeah, it's such an unassuming film. I think it can be very easy for people to sort of like sit down, watch it, kind of just like crank it out on a lazy afternoon. It's definitely that kind of film. It's more of a take it or leave it kind of film than anything else. So I'm not super negative with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think talking with you, I'm more positive than I was when I was watching it. I do think, I mean, to your point, like I think they're trying to be inclusive with the gender politics. I just think the execution of it's kind of clumsy. Like I don't think it's for a lack of trying. I just think the execution of it is just from like older guys who I just don't think really know how exactly to communicate this message, which is unfortunate. But I do agree. I think as the reviewer mentioning was pointing out, like I think this movie is sort of the opposite of the first in that like the end of it is I think where it starts to kind of pick up and come alive as opposed to the original film where it just kind of like deflates to its end. This one, like I think like you said, like when it is just like the characters having fun and like that party that aesthetic to it, I think that is when it actually starts to like really kind of have fun in an infectious sort of way and it's not in a forced sort of way. Now there's still a lot of like awkward like callbacks to the first film that come at the end, and that it's really hard to sit through because it's just like, here's this reference and you remember this shot and do you know this one and here's this thing too, and that's annoying. But at the same time, like you said, like the production quality of it, especially coming from a studio comedy, because it's so rare now to see studio comedies put this much money into something, especially when it comes to building a world like the ones we see here. And I think, Ruth Carter's work obviously is quite good. I don't think it's quite on par with Black Panther, but it's still, clearly like the costumes here are an upgrade from the first film, which, especially rewatching the film, there is kind of like a cheesiness to it that's kind of fun, but definitely an improvement over that. But
yeah, I want to call out on that note, Teyana Taylor, who plays the daughter of General Easy, her whole scene, also where Wesley Snipes is involved with Jermaine Fowler, there's this like musical sequence that happens that is a blast, like a total blast. I thought that was one of the points where I was like, can this be the movie?
Yeah, especially because it kind of is lazy otherwise, and it's just like if you're just gonna have like a fun get together party, just might as well just relish that. And I think it does at times, but at the same time, I just don't think it's really quite there. It's just an underwhelming effort by and large. And I mean, I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan of these like decades later sequels to begin with. I wasn't even that crazy about the new Bill and Ted, so I'm coming at this with a disadvantage. But I do like the first movie, and I wanted this movie to succeed primarily because even though we just had Dolomite Is My Name, like Eddie Murphy still hasn't really come back in a big way yet. And I was hoping this movie could be that for him, and I just don't think it is, and that's really unfortunate. But it is what it is.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe his comeback will coincide with the next Shrek movie. Who knows? But yeah, I definitely am kind of feeling pretty middling with this. I give it like a C. I think it's like half good, half bad, that kind of thing. And it's definitely not like Borat's subsequent movie film. It's not Bill and Ted. It's not even something like Doctor Sleep, another kind of sequel, I guess. It really is just sort of the kind of thing that I think people will definitely not really remember for a long time and just go back to the original film whenever they want to revisit and have fun with these characters. But again, if you love that film, if you love those characters and you just want to see what's next for them, this is a no-brainer. I mean, just it's on Amazon Prime. It's pretty accessible, and a lot of people won't be disappointed watching it, I don't think. So yeah, it's a C for me. What about you, Will?
Yeah, I'm a C minus on it. It reminded me a decent bit of Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, where it's like kind of trying to reckon with the new age, but just so caught up in its own nostalgia that it just can't really fully be its own thing. And in one respect, like it's obviously just hearkening to the fans, and I can respect that. But at the same time, as someone who liked the original film, I just found those callbacks to be really tiring and forced in a way that felt like kind of like a Super Bowl commercial. Like when they bring back the dude, or when they brought back Wayne and Garth for that Wayne's World Uber thing, it just was like,
Yeah.
just let them be. Just let them be of their time. You know, it's just like I get the desire to like bring these characters back. I obviously want to see them again, but it's like not like this. Not like this.
Okay.
So yeah, I didn't have fun with this, and I found it to be probably the worst thing we talked about this week. So yeah, a disappointing film for me.
All right. Well, if you want to see Coming to America for yourself, it is now available to stream on Amazon Prime Video. It is 110 minutes long. Thank you so much for listening to our show. Be sure to subscribe to Cinemaholics on your favorite podcast app of choice, or find us on YouTube. See you all next time.